Zoos, a fun place for people to go to see animals that they normally wouldn't get to see. It is a great place where you can go to learn all about animals, plants, and their habitats. As a kid, I loved going to the zoo. Every year, my mom would take my siblings and I to the zoo, and we would spend the whole day there. I absolutely refused to leave until we went to every exhibit and saw every animal. My favorite animals to see were the okapis and the orangutans. I love seeing all the extraordinary animals and learning cool facts about them. I always saw the zoo as such a great place because I knew that the animals were being taken good care of, or at least that's what I thought. Over the past decade, many people have been questioning whether or not zoos are even ethical, and if it is right to keep them in cages. Even though we may not see anything wrong with it at first glance, a lot of evidence has been brought to light about the animals being mistreated and abused. People were outraged that the animals were being mistreated because they thought, how can we sit back and watch animals being mistreated? Because we wouldn't want the same thing done to us. Many people kept saying that keeping animals in the zoos is wrong and that they should be sent back to the wild. If people reacted so angrily to animals being in cages, how do you think that they would react to the same thing being done to humans? Can you imagine if humans were in cages, if our people were put on display and people would stare and poke at? Although this may be hard to believe, this has happened numerous times in the past, and these stories need to be heard. They were called human zoos, and we have William Temple Hornaday to thank for that. Hornaday worked at the National Smithsonian Museum in New York, and he had a vision of doing something that had never been done before. He talked to the directors of the museum, and he told them that he wanted to add a wing to the museum where they would recreate animals' natural habitats and display the living animals there. After a lot of convincing, Hornaday was able to get his idea into motion, and the National Zoological Gardens was established, which he became the first director of. Hornaday purchased a chimp from Samuel Philip Werner and put him on display with a 23-year-old man named Benga. Little did Hornaday know that this exhibit would be so popular that millions of people would come to see it, but would also lead to him receiving a lot of backlash for it. The St. Louis Exhibition Company funded Samuel Werner in 1903 to go to what we now know as the Democratic Republic of Congo and find pygmies to be put on display at the 1904 St. Louis Fair. In March 1904, Werner purchased Benga at a slave market from the Bashal people. He bought Benga for a pound of salt and a bolt of cloth. Benga ended up in the slave market after being captured by the Force Publique, which was funded by the government of Belgium. The Force Publique slaughtered his whole tribe, including his wife and children. When Benga was brought to the U.S., he hoped to get help for his people in the Congo and to come back home soon. But Benga had no idea what was in store for him. For the St. Louis Fair, thousands of indigenous people from all over the world were brought to be put on display. The fair had the Ingorots from the Philippines, Native Americans, including the Geronimo people, the Malayan people, the Sinhalese people from Sri Lanka, pygmies from the Congo, including Benga, and many other indigenous peoples. The anthropology wing was where they were showcased, and they were referred to as strange persons. The fair organizers simulated their villages and huts to look similar to the ones from their home, and they were closed in by fences. The purpose of the fair was to mark colonial rule and to exhibit the people of the world. They presented all of the people of darker complexions as savages, and that they were trophies of conquest and objects of scientific wonder. Over 4 million people came to visit the museum during the short amount of time that the exhibit was open. The visitors would stare at the indigenous people, poke them, and harass them. The organizers of the fair forced them to participate in athletic events to demonstrate that they were physically inferior. The anthropology department even also ran tests on the people to test their threshold of pain, intelligence, and physical features. Everyone who visited the fair was so excited to see Benga because they called him the only genuine African cannibal in America. For a nickel, he would show his pointed teeth that allowed him to cut through human flesh. The pygmies were presented to be subhuman, and the scientists said that they were the lowest part of the evolutionary ladder. They said that they were even closer to monkeys and apes than they were to humans. After the fair, Werner traveled with the pygmies to take them back to the Congo. When Werner tried to leave Benga, Benga begged him to take him back to the U.S. with him. When Werner declined his request, Benga said that he would kill himself. So Werner was left with no choice but to take Benga back with him. Benga hoped to learn to read and write in the U.S. and to make something of himself, since nothing was left for him in the Congo. But Werner had other plans for Benga. Since he was no longer making money off of Benga from the fair, he saw this as the perfect opportunity to make money off of Benga. Werner dropped Benga off at the American Natural History Museum in Manhattan, New York. Benga was left to wander around the museum halls, and he refused to take orders from the museum's director at the time, Armand Bumpus. Bumpus then contacted Werner and said that Benga had to be removed from the museum immediately. Bumpus suggested to Werner to contact the director of the Bronx Zoological Garden, William Temple Hornaday, and he said that the zoo might be a better place to keep Benga. Werner was delighted to work with Hornaday because he felt that he utilized Benga in the way that he had initially intended for him to be used. Benga was put in a cage covered with bones. They gave him a bow and arrow to make him seem more dangerous. He was housed in a cage with a gorilla named Dinah and an orangutan named Dohung. Benga's exhibit was opened to the public on September 18, 1906. The sign for his exhibit said, "The African Pygmy, Ode to Benga, age 23 years old, 4 feet and 11 inches, weight 103 pounds, brought from the Kasi River, Congo, Free Sato, South Central Africa, by Dr. Samuel P. Bernard, exhibited each afternoon during September." Thousands of people came to see the pygmy in the zoo. The visitors stared, laughed, and debated as to whether or not he was a monkey, a man, or something in between. A group of Black New York clergymen heard about the exhibit, and they went to see it for themselves. They were horrified. Reverend Robert Stewart MacArthur said, "The person responsible for this exhibition degrades himself as much as he does the African. Instead of making this little fellow a beast, he should be in school." MacArthur and James H. Gordon, the superintendent of the Howard Asylum in Brooklyn, New York, appealed to the zoo and the mayor at the time, George B. McClellan, saying that the exhibit must be shut down immediately. Werner and Hornaday denied all the accusations and refused to close the exhibit down. They made up lucrative lies like Benga had been kept there for convenience and that he was enjoying his stay and he was enjoying staying in the cage with the chimp. After a month, Hornaday got tired of the bad press and had Benga moved to the Howard Asylum, and he would later be moved to a seminary in Lynchburg, Virginia. Benga tried to reach out to Werner because he wanted to go back home, but Werner was struggling so much financially that he could not help him. Benga had considered Werner to be his one true friend, and he was the only person that Benga could actually communicate with. Benga was quoted as saying, "Me no like America." 12 years after Benga had first been brought to America, in 1904, he shot himself on March 20th in 1916. A lot was done to try to cover up the mistreatment that Benga experienced. The New York Times even wrote an obituary about Benga, where they covered up the dehumanization he experienced in the Bronx Zoo by saying that he was actually an employee of the zoo. They said that he was housed with the chimp to feed the animals and to take care of them. It would be decades until people would hear Benga's whole story and people would start to be held accountable for their actions. Ode to Benga is not the only person to be commodified and exodized for the financial benefit of white people. He was just lucky enough that his story is being told now. There are probably millions of other people who went through similar things to Ode to Benga, or even worse, and their stories are still being pushed under the rug. It is so important that we learn about stories like this because the point of learning about history is so that we can learn about it, address our mistakes, discuss it, and then be able to move forward from it. The next time that you go to the zoo and see those animals behind the cages, think to yourself, wow, there's so many untold stories of Black people who went through this exact same thing. Thank you for watching.